Okay, so what we have here was something I seen a so-called Aborigine posted as a sarcastic remark that this book cannot be accurate. I spent maybe a few hours going back and forth with he and four other vulgar and disgusting, and I only say that based on their actions. I mean, when you take a man's picture of his wife and post it without his permission with penises on her, that's vulgar and disgusting. Not based on anything I said, just based on the fact you don't like my rebuttal to this is not a tree as the editor has described, but this is a vine that's wrapped around the tree, much like the kudzu vine. Once the kudzu vine, and those of you who live in the South know what I'm talking about, once it engulfs a tree and grows up it, that's all you see is the kudzu vine, and you don't know what species of tree is underneath. When I started paying closer attention to this is not a tree as in the normal sense, but look at the vine that's wrapping around it. And then pay attention as we zoom in, you gotta pay attention real close. Right here, you can see where the vine at the top there starts to branch out into branches for the tree, which have arrowhead shaped leaves. Now bear with me for a moment. And here we have it, the arrowhead vine. So just like in that image, the vine that's wrapped around it, this vine will wrap around the trees here. Let me slide down to the, the etymology? No, description, there it is. Here we go. And as you can see there, it wraps himself to, tropical jungle trees. I mean, to the roots, indoor reaches and heights of, and this is what I believe he's describing as the arrowhead tree that was on the cover of that book. So my warning to you, if you do decide to debate, what this tree is, don't fall for the word tree, because that's where they're going to try to get you. Because even if you point out the vine, you point out, zoom in, look at where the vine branches off, that it's literally the branches of the tree. They're only looking for a fight. They only want you to prove there's a tree that grows less, because if you can't prove it's a tree, then therefore everything else is wrong. We even went back and forth on, which I thought was, weird. They're supposed to be American Aborigines, and they were saying this guy drew flying dinosaurs. Well, as you've seen, most of their religions have a flying horned serpent or a flying serpent with multiple names depending on what tribe, right? I even showed them that their people even believe in unicorns. I mean, that was like a let's educate the Siberian day, But I just want you to warn you, don't fall for that. Don't fall for the tree part. Know that when you're looking at it, if you zoom in, you'll see it's a vine. Again, there's the vine going up the tree. And like I said, as you get to the top, you can see 1, 2, 3 sections where it starts to branch out and become the branches of the tree. So it's literally, the editor calls it a tree, when it looks to me this is a vine that's wrapped itself around a tree, the arrowhead vine. Now, I'm not sure if many of you have listened to this before, but I wanted to share this anyways. I will remember to put part 1, 2, and 3 in the description box. There's more, but these are the ones I found interesting, especially 2. If you've listened to this man read Montgomery's book 1 and 2 on America is still a British colony, you'll understand that a lot of these are the rebuttals. People have emailed him about the book and his responses to it. But there was something in his response. There was maybe three things in this tape of the response, part two, that I feel apply to us. So this is why I want to share it. I'll do my best not to speak, but there are going to be parts where I'm going to stop and point out what I'm hearing. So like I said, I'll put 1, 2, and 3 in here. Like I said, there's more, but I'll put 1, 2, and 3 in here so you can get the context and listen to them without me talking.
No. And this is part 2 of email questions answered by James Montgomery. Comments of Sir Edmund Burke. Read the following quote, just one of many from his speech. Quote, "If America gives you taxable objects on which you lay your duties here, and gives you at the same time a surplus by a foreign sale of her commodities to pay the duties on these objects, which you tax at home, she has performed her part to the British revenue. But with regard to her own internal establishments, she may, I doubt not she will, contribute in moderation. I say in moderation, for she ought not to be permitted to exhaust herself. She ought to be reserved to a war, the weight of which, with the enemies that we are most likely to have, must be considerable in her quarter of the globe. There she may serve you, and serve you essentially." Unquote. There she may serve you, and serve you essentially. For that service, for all service, whether of revenue, trade, or empire, my trust is in her interest in the British Constitution. My hold of the colonies is in the close affection which grows from common names, from kindred blood, from similar privileges, and equal protection. These are ties which, though light as air, are as strong as links of iron. Let the colonists always keep the idea of their civil rights associated with your government. They will cling and grapple to you, and no force under heaven will be of power to tear them from their allegiance." Unquote. Burke, on Conciliation with the Colonies, March 22nd, 1775, pages 71 and 72, published by Allen and Bacon. Quote, "In May 1775, Washington said, 'If you ever hear of me joining in any such measure as separation from Great Britain, you have my leave to set me down for everything wicked.'" And apparently that can be found on Burke on Conciliation with the Colonies. And that's from March 22nd, 1775, pages 71, 72, published by Allen and Bacon. Following quote is from Ingersoll, North American Review, number 2, August 1892, page 183. It's also quoted in Sources of the Constitution by C. Ellis Stevens from 1927, page 36. Here is that quote. Quote, "In May 1775, George Washington said, 'If you ever hear of me joining in any such measure as separation from Great Britain, you have my leave to set me down for everything wicked.' He also said, 'It is not wish or interest of the government of Massachusetts or of any other upon this continent, separately or collectively, to set up for independence.'" Unquote. Marty, John Jay, one of the men to construct and sign the peace treaty of 1783, and the sole man responsible for the Jay Treaty of 1795, he made very clear by his statements that he did not want independence from England. And as Burke said above, you can believe you are free and still be subject to England. That is what Burke said, wasn't it? Let them think they're free. All we want is their money. The following quote is from 1995, Left Justified Publics. It doesn't say the book. Quote, "Jay did not favor independence from Britain. His absence from the signing of the Declaration of Independence was noted by Thomas Jefferson." Unquote. You know, Jefferson, for being such a smart guy, he seems one of the more clueless men those elitists who adopted the Constitution. Weird. Marty, to prove what Sir Edmund Burke said is possible and was part of the plan of the king, you need to look at the 1213 Charter and the 1689 Declaration of Rights. Because of space limitations, I was not able to include them in this email, but will send them to you if you want them. I did include them in America is Still a British Colony, Part 3. The following is a section from my addendum from America is Still a British Colony, Part 3. Here is the addendum. I have just discovered the following two end notes. They completely confirm in a very final way my research in America is Still a British Colony, Parts 1 and 2 and 3, and the Informer's research and book, The New History of America. If you will study the following papers, the Magna Carta and our Bill of Rights, and come to an understanding of their similarities, then please reread the charters included in British Colony Parts 1 and 2, keeping in mind the issues I raised, and then read the following commentary. Quote, the two main issues as I see them in British Colony are, 1, the financial obligations of the 1213 Charter, EN number 1, entry number 1, I guess, are still in effect, along with the charters establishing America. 2, the last sentence of the 1689 Bill of Rights, entry number 2, proves the following. Unquote, and here's another quote starting. I'm not sure if this is the same. It looks like it's coming from something called Statute of 32. It says statute. I'm going to guess that's supposed to be statute. Statute of 32, Henry VIII. From 1540. Is that right? Page 84. Okay. Here goes. Quote, that the charters of the colonies could never be overturned by a declaration of... Okay, obviously this did not come from Henry VIII in 1540. It's talking about the Declaration of Independence. All right. Needless to say, okay, these emails, this correspondence could have been organized better, but just ignore that. The information is very rare. Wherever this quote comes from, I'll read it. I don't know what it is. Quote, that the charters of the colonies could never be overturned by a Declaration of Independence or the 1787 Treaty, otherwise known as the Constitution. Okay, this is looking like it's from James Montgomery himself. Why does he have it in quotes? Doggone it. I'm talking about the real subject matter, financial obligation. Title for the land was transferred to the states and then ceded by charter to the federal government under Sestui K. Trust, but the contracted debt and obligation of the colonial charters and the 1213 Charter could not be negated. Rights could be granted to the citizens, subjects, or combatants, whichever the case may be, but the financial obligation cannot nor could not be affected, because it involves parties not yet born. This...
Right, so pause right there. That's one of the parts I wanted to get to, right? The thought that they can claim they wrote a Bill of Rights, right? They wrote a Declaration of Independence. They wrote a Constitution, all claiming that this was a part of them declaring their freedom from Great Britain. But the truth seems to be that the only ones who could write such acts that would free themselves from Britain are the generations who are descendants of the signers of the original treaties that were to come, that were not here yet, right? think about this for a moment. Lex will ask this question to me twice, I remember, and it stumped me every single time. Why do they number, or why do they label, give like a label to each generation, right? Generation X, generation, you get it, yada, yada, yada. Every generation had a generation, something to it, right? But then they just, at some point, they stopped labeling the generations, right? Like they almost, this was the after that last generation, this would be the generation that they don't have to label anymore. What was the purpose of doing that to all those other generations before? So they can almost keep track. This generation will fulfill this generation will fulfill that. I mean, you see the manipulation of each generation by them. And you even see the manipulation of this generation right now. We're keeping them in the idea of Black Lives Matter, right? Got them pulled to we're Moors, Black Hebrew Israelites, you know, African, you know, Pan-African and all that stuff. Pulling them each, everybody's trying to pull this generation to each section to keep them going in different directions instead of coming together under one thought. Which, I mean, I know there's no such thing as unity. You can, I mean, don't get me started. Anywhere you go, you'll find nobody's unified. I don't care. No one can give you that idea, but still the idea that this generation is facing so many, you know, people pulling them in different directions. I mean, we're not even talking about not the Moors, but the Masons, you know, the people that subscribe to Egyptology and everything like that. I mean, there's so many things out there pulling them to each phase to keep them distracted and arguing, right? But when I heard this and I heard them say that they, meaning from this point of view, think about this, they tell us that the Europeans did this, that they fought for their independence, right? And that was what, the Revolutionary War with George Washington? But George Washington said he never wanted separation from Great Britain. We all know Benjamin Franklin was an agent, what's it called there? An esquire, working for the kings of Europe, right? When it came to them in the peace treaty with France of Paris, so the idea that here, we'll write a Declaration of Independence, we'll write the Bill of Rights, we'll write a Constitution, and now we're granted all the freedoms in the world because we beat Great Britain and they're out of here, but yet all of the representatives they sent to sign the Treaty of France were working as esquires for the European powers. You can't serve two masters, right? You can't be Mr. I'm independent, while at the same time, I don't want to have anything to do with breaking away from Britain. So listen closely. I'm going to rewind a little bit. Listen closely. So see, just to formulate your own thoughts. Is he's literally saying that the generation not yet born is the only one that can abolish treaties, right? Contracts, the slavery with Great Britain, with Rome.
But the financial obligation cannot nor could not be affected because it involves parties not yet born. This is why King William said, the 1689 Bill of Rights would not free the kingdom from the obligation of the 1213 Charter, where King John gave England to the Pope at that time in 1213. That's again why the 1215 Magna Carta is useless, that and the fact it was signed under duress. This is why the United States Bank was given right of charter in America. George Washington had no choice but to succumb to the... twist his arm behind his back, right? Washington had no choice but to succumb to the Rothschilds' point man, Hamilton. Talk about deja vu. I mean, does this not sound familiar? Our Bill of Rights was given to us to give us the illusion of freedom. When the tax obligation of the charters above marched along unimpeded and unseen by Americans and Britons alike. Read the Magna Carta again. They wanted the Pope's blessing for the 1215 Charter. This same Pope is the Pope in the 1213 Charter, where England and Ireland were given to him. He could not just give back his land because of other parties not yet born. You think the elitists are that stupid? They're going to create laws to prevent one of their own, who might be weaker than the usual, one of their own from giving the whole...
And just real quick, doesn't this make you question then, what is Prince Henry and what's her name, Angela Merkel, I think it is. What are they doing together? Right? I mean, would they produce something, meaning their seed in the future, would that produce something that is a party to the land over here, right? That when it grows up, it can sign treaties to abolish them, or sign treaties that were written, and by their signature, by its autograph, it can then abolish old treaties that they want abolished. And it would be all fair because none of us have stepped up. And they know where all the bodies are buried. It's just something to think about. I mean, I know I'm throwing a lot of theories out there, but just that's why I felt like this is important, because a lot of times other people hear this and they'll hear it correctly. When I'm hearing it, I'm just hearing it from what I want to hear.
Farm away. So they've created laws like the Law of Mortmain, which you probably will discuss here somewhere, which makes it impossible for the Pope or the King to give away anything that's supposed to be ceded to his children. What do you think they would do? Come on. That's their built-in security clause. Of course they're going to protect themselves. He couldn't give us back his land because of parties not yet born. The Pope let the barons presume they were free, and even gave his blessing to the 1215 Magna Carta, knowing to do so would in no way lawfully overturn the grant made to him in the 1213 Charter. Also, it is apparent, it was recognized as law that you could not even create a charter wherein you declared a previous grant or charter null in void unless the relevant parties both agreed. All agreed. How can a charter be made void if parties to the charter will never cease to be born? An heir can always be found. To prove this, again, what did the new King William do? Even though the previous monarchy had come to an end, its obligations, though, did not. This is why he had to include paragraph 3, a clause to protect the other parties of an earlier charter. Unquote. Marty, to prove our point, read the following previous email I sent out so as not to replicate work. All right, and I think this is James Montgomery's writing again. You will have to read the below statute many times to understand what the king is saying. It was obviously made to be vague and ambiguous. It contains 2 sentences. The first is 658 words long. The second is 166 words long, not counting punctuation. I have included the following commentary to help your understanding of the below statute. The king is saying that some of the representatives, I think this might be talking about Statute of 32 by Henry VIII, 1540, I don't know. The king is also saying that some of the representatives of the Catholic Church and some of his subjects have received grants of land from the king. The king is also saying they are in violation of certain provisions contained in the grants and land patents. Portions of these grants and land patents were granted to third-party entities by his first-party grantees through the king's grants and charters, having been granted to them. Because of contractual provisions contained in the grants and land patents being violated, the land was declared to revert back to the original grantees who received grants from the king. As stated in Section 1, this statute deals with land twice removed from the king. To preserve the clarity of his grants and land patents, in conjunction with the law of mortmain. There it is, the law of mortmain. You will see that the first-party grantors included ecclesiastical and religious persons, as well as secular. This statute does not change grants between the king and the first-party grantees and land patentees. Number 7, Section 1 should make you think. If any tax or rent due, as declared in number 5, Section 1, under the king's grants or charters, are not paid, the land reverts back to the king, as if the grants and charters were never written. This is the same language of intent used in the 1689 Declaration of Rights, 3rd section, and the 25th section, in also the 1776 North Carolina Bill of Rights, of the North Carolina 1776 Constitution, which established the North Carolina Corporation. Just like every other state is a corporation. Just like the federal government is a corporation. Deal with it, Collins Brothers. In Section 2, the king extends this statute to all grants made by him now or in the future. The key and purpose to this statute is contained in number 2, Section 1. No stranger is to enjoy a benefit of any grant or charter, if they are not a grantee and benefactor, without paying a rent or tax. See number 5, Section 1. The main target of this statute was the Catholic Church. Okay, so he must be talking about Statute of 32 by Henry VIII, 1540. All right. The main target of this statute was the Catholic Church, because they were not paying the tax due under the grants made to them. However, as shown in previous emails, the Vatican owned the land they were being taxed for under the 1213 Charter when King John at the time gave England and Ireland to the Pope at that time. I am sure this is why the Vatican refused to pay the tax, because the owner of the land does not tax himself. Since the states were the benefactors of the 1783 peace treaty, not the inhabitants, and they later transferred their original grant from the king to the United States Constitution / corporation, making the inhabitants of the states strangers. Maybe now you know how and why you are taxed. And when the tax is not paid, the land reverts back to the benefactor of the king's original land grants, the United States Corporation, the trustee administering the trust / constitution / charter. Nothing has changed since the days of William the Conqueror, where taxes were levied based on the record of the land holdings written down in his Doomsday Book, used by
And William the Conqueror, that's somebody that I've actually taken an interest in reading and learning about his laws, the king's laws. It was actually a suggestion by Arthur Scott Jr. When we were talking about the French and others and Napoleon. He got brought up, and man, when you start to realize that a lot of his stuff is what they're still using today, their laws. I was watching a video about Native Americans battling for their land back, and it was literally in one of the recordings when they went to court. They were told that what law was being used against them, and they called it the King's Law. And when I looked it up, it had to go back to England, and that was another thing that made me stop and think, wait a minute. If the United States is, independent and free and clear, and it's the creditor and everybody that's citizens, the debtor to the United States and all that wonderful jazz, how could they still be using laws from England to hold the Indians' land from the Indian or from the Native American? I'm gonna see if I can find the video so I can point it out, because I think it's under like the Bad Man Act or something like that.
The Exchequer to tax the benefactors of the king's grants. Today, the same procedure is followed, continued under the charters which created this country, this corporation. The king established the rent roll tax in the states based on the county's record of all titles, which are now used by the Exchequer/Federal Reserve to tax the stranger, levy, or foreclose on the riot tenure as defined in Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. A system of land tenure where the government takes the place of landowners and collects the rent by means of tax gatherers. The farming is done by poor peasants, or ryots, who find the capital so far as there is any, and also do the work. The system exists in Turkey, Egypt. That puts us in really good company, huh? The system exists in Turkey, Egypt, Persia, and other Eastern countries, and in a modified form in British India. After slavery, it is accounted the worst of all systems. And this is what we have. And people think we're free. Oh, Lord, help us. It is accounted after slavery the worst of all systems because the government can fix the rent at whatever it pleases. And it is difficult to distinguish between rent and taxes. And that's a quote from Black's Law Dictionary, I think. That might be Montgomery's words. However, he's getting the information from, again, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Read 'em and weep, folks. Read 'em and weep. I want to inject a big however. And here it is. The king and the Vatican are both in violation of the law. They do not have ownership of the land or have perfected land title, no matter what their charters and land patents say. And why is that? Why do you think that would be? Who is the original grantor of land? God Almighty. Not the king or the pope. Their claim to the land, to the detriment of the righteous, their claim will be revoked. Who did God Almighty entrust the land to? The church, i.e. government, the Christians, trustees of Christ's kingdom. Are not the riches of the world stored up for the righteous? Do not the kingdoms of the world become the kingdom of Christ upon his return? I tell you what, I'm liking the sound of this, folks. I've been on the brink of poor all my life, and I dropped